Welcome to Genesis, Creation as It Didn't Happen, Part 2. At the end of my previous video, we left Noah and his motley crew sitting in their unseaworthy, animal poo-filled and extremely dangerous floating gas chamber cum bomb, the Ark, up on Mount Ararat, waiting for God to pull the plug, so to speak, and drain away all the waters of the great flood. Well, now the world is dry again, and all the plant life, the grass, trees, vegetation of all kinds, has somehow survived being underwater for a year, since Noah didn't take any bags of seeds for every plant on earth with him into the ark, and all that vegetation still exists. So it must have survived the aquatic immersion, which of course is quite impossible. The tremendous pressure of that depth of water. Remember, even the highest mountains were underwater. That's several miles deep of water. Lack of sunlight and so on. There wouldn't be a green thing to be seen anywhere on the face of the earth. It would rather resemble the surface of Mars, though perhaps not quite as red. But that's okay. That's okay. Pretty much everything else in Genesis is impossible too, so it fits right in. Anyway, our noble leader and his family disembark from their impossible ship, and all the creatures that walk, crawl, or fly follow suit. Noah builds an altar, slaughters a few animals, and he has himself a little sacrifice. And God likes the smell of the burnt offerings. In fact, he likes it so much that he says he will never again smite things. No more smiting. He's finished with smiting. No more floods, no more global genocides, which is, of course, very little comfort, of course, to everything he's already flooded out of existence. But, he's clearly no animal lover, since he tells Noah that all the creatures that walk, crawl, fly, etc., are to be delivered unto him and his descendants, and they will live in fear and dread of humans. How nice. Let's create all these creatures, little fluffy bunnies and things, and then terrify them into submission. He also says that no man shall shed the blood of another man, for man is made in the image of God, and any man who shall, well, he will have his blood shed as well. So no killing of other men. Now women aren't mentioned, but then women usually aren't in the Bible. They're not important enough. So was it okay to shed female blood? Or were they so unimportant that, that nobody even bothered to sort of include them? Well, doesn't matter. The absolute ban on bloodshedding is rather strange, though, since in chapters to come, God orders the shedding of rivers of blood, shedding some of it himself. So the no blood shedding, which is a good idea, of course, I'd thoroughly go along with that, it seems rather contradictory in view of subsequent events of mass carnage, either ordered by or even committed by God himself. Now, God makes a sacred covenant with Noah, establishing all of this. And as a sign of it, he creates the rainbow, so that he will remember his covenant whenever he sees it, saying, "And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant." Yes, so God has to give himself a reminder, like without the rainbow thingy up in the sky, he might just forget all about it. Covenant? What covenant? Oh, yes, yes, there's a rainbow. I remember now, that covenant thingy I gave you. Sorry about that, slipped my mind there for a bit. Yes, how would God need a reminder? He's God. That is putting very human traits onto God, as the Bible does a great deal, and frankly I find that insulting to God. In any case, a rainbow is due to refraction, reflection, and dispersion of light in water droplets. And it's a naturally occurring phenomenon, but far from, created as a symbol of any covenant, God would have created it automatically when he made the sun, the earth, atmosphere, and rain. It already existed. So it had nothing to do with any covenants or an absent-minded God needing a reminder. Now, Noah, that fine, upstanding man, the one human being in all creation, noble and good enough to be spared from the flood, he becomes a husbandman and he plants vineyards, harvesting the grapes and making wine. Excellent. I mean, that's a good thing to do. Except for the fact that he becomes rather too fond of his own vintage. This ever so pure and good man who found favor with God beyond all other men becomes a total lush. He's drunk out of his mind. Stocious, as we might say here. He throws off all his clothes, rambles around his tent completely naked, and falls into a drunken sleep. Now his son, Ham, comes in. He sees his father laid out naked, which, given Noah's age, was probably rather a gruesome sight. And he runs to fetch his brothers, and they get a garment, and they walk backwards with it to cover their father without having to look at him. And then they leave with their faces backward so as not to see his nakedness. When Noah wakes up from his drunken stupor, he's angry. Oh, he's more than angry. He is furious. He's angry with himself for having made a fool of himself, right? No, not at all. He's perfectly happy with that part. He's angry with Ham for finding him and getting him covered up. Genesis saying that he knew what his youngest son had done to him. Yes, well, what exactly had Ham done to him? Ham didn't make him drink himself unconscious or throw his clothes off. He did that to himself. All Ham did was try to help him, cover him so he wouldn't be embarrassed. But this noble Noah, the only man worth saving from the flood, promptly curses Ham, cursing him to be no more than a servant to his brother Shem. With a father like that, who needs enemies? And remember, this was the most pure, most perfect man who had ever existed, the man who had found God's favor, the man who was the model for the decency, the proper behavior, the nobility and goodness that God had wanted for all mankind. And the entire human race is descended from him. Is it any wonder the history of the world has been one of injustice, violence, intolerance, and irrational behavior? I mean, just look at who founded it. Noah was not a nice guy. Sorry, God, you picked a drunken bum. If he was the finest human, I really wouldn't have wanted to meet the others. So now we get another of those seemingly never-ending genealogies that the Bible loves so much, as Noah's sons start begetting more sons. And we get 3 generations of Noah's descendants. And one of those is very interesting. And that is the great hunter, Nimrod. But there's a bit of a problem with Nimrod. You see, he found 2 kingdoms, and he starts building cities in them. Among them 3 of the greatest cities of the Middle East, Nineveh, Babylon, and Uruk. Cities whose names will resound down through the centuries. And as well as 5 other cities, which archaeologists are a bit unsure about as to their exact locations, but the 3 big ones, well, we know them very well. That's fine. But where exactly did he get the people to put in them? This is only the 3rd generation after a mere 8 people survived the flood. And of that 8, there were only 3 breeding pairs, Noah's sons and their wives. So assuming that all the women across those 3 generations we are told about had the maximum number of babies it is possible for a human female to have, and that none of the women died in childbirth, as was very, very common back then. None of the babies died in infancy, also very common in those days. Nor anyone was killed in any way by accident, combat, or illness, which, given the lack of hygiene, the lack of medicine, the turbulent nature of life, at that time seems highly unlikely. Actually, in fact, it's impossible. But allowing for it actually being true, there couldn't have been more than some 250 people on Earth. And that's with being generous with the numbers, maybe add in a few twins or something. So how does Nimrod get 2 kingdoms, each with 4 cities out of so few people? That's like 31 people per city. That wouldn't even count as a village. And there's another problem. Oh yeah, and a really big one. We can date some of those cities. We know when they were founded. Babylon dates from 2300 BC, Uruk from around 4000 BC, and Nineveh from 6000 BC. So Nimrod couldn't possibly have founded them. Unless, of course, he lived for over 4,000 years, which would be stretching even the ridiculously long lifespans given to some people in Genesis. Plus the fact that those cities were not all founded by the same cultures. They were not linked together in any way. There is no common denominator. They had no common founder. So Nimrod goes out the window as far as any actual historical connections are concerned. Clearly, he didn't exist. Or if he did, well, he didn't do what the Bible claims he did. They just used his name. A proven historical error. Now, if he founded Babylon, he would also have been responsible, presumably, for the Tower of Babel, though that isn't stated as such in the Bible, just that the families of the sons of Noah found a plain in the land of Shinar, dwelt there, and made bricks. Having made bricks, they decided to use said bricks to construct a city, Babylon, and a tower that will reach up to the heavens. Now God comes down to have a look at this wonderful tower, and he does not like it one bit. Oh no. And he thinks that because they've done this, and they all speak the same language, oh yes, they all speak the same language, that nothing they imagine will be restrained from them, which makes absolutely no sense at all. They want to build a tower, so what? What's wrong with towers? So anyway, he confounds their language, we are told, so they can't understand one another, and he scatters them upon the face of all the earth. Now, when you think of it, that isn't going to stop them building towers. They don't need a common language to do that or anything else, really. Any small group that still all speak the same language are just the same as everyone speaking it as far as constructing things goes, including towers. Unless God, of course, had given a unique, personal, individual language to each and every person on the planet, which he didn't. So it seems rather pointless. But this was the biblical explanation for people inhabiting the known world. The writers of Genesis, you see, they had to get people from Mesopotamia to other places. And the Tower of Babel was the key to doing that. But again, there's a problem. And the scattering of people across the earth due to the building of the Tower of Babel is a total fallacy, since people were all over the place long before Babylon was founded. Extensive trade was going on across the known world, from Egypt as far as Afghanistan, for example. Afghanistan is where the Egyptians got lapis lazuli. And a tower, a ziggurat, was built before the founding of Babylon. The first one we know of is at least 100 years older than Babylon. So that story, as the reason people were spread out from Mesopotamia across the world following the flood, is, like Nimrod, pure fabrication. See, the writers of Genesis, obviously, they had no knowledge of India or China, where people had lived for thousands of years before their time, or Australia, where the Aboriginal people had already existed for many, many thousands of years, or North America, where humans had settled at least 15,000 years ago, and probably a lot earlier, according to recent discoveries. We know early humans existed between 200,000 and 300,000 years ago, and they probably developed language about 50,000 years ago. Another error in the Bible. And do remember that if the Bible were the Word of God, it would contain no errors. God would know everything about everything. He created it after all. He's God, so why wouldn't he? And if even one thing in the Bible is provably wrong, then everything in it is open to question. Which bits are right, which bits are wrong? The multitudinous provable errors in Genesis alone show that those who claim the Bible to be the absolute, total, unquestionable truth, the Word of God which cannot be challenged at all, are barking up the wrong tree. And we're not even talking the tree of knowledge in the garden, because their knowledge isn't really very good. The tree knew more than they did. After a lot more very boring pages of begetting, though they do actually manage to beget a few daughters. How amazing! That's wonderful! They've been begetting people all over the place up to then without any women involved in it at all, it seems, which is biologically a bit off. We now meet one Abram and his wife Sarai. But Sarai is barren, as they put it. She can't conceive. Good, so that's going to reduce the next round of begetting we have to read through, hopefully. But anyway, God tells Abram to go forth, to leave his country, leave his kinfolk, get out of his father's house, and God will show him a land, and he will make him a great nation and bless him, which sounds like a pretty good deal. So Abram ups and he goes forth. taking his relative Lot and assorted other people along for good measure. And they go to the land of Canaan. The Lord appeared to Abram and told him that unto his seed this land would be given. Hang on a minute. Apart from being, 75 years old, Abram's wife Sarai is unable to conceive. So how exactly is Abram supposed to produce those who are to inherit the land? Yes, well, this is the Bible, so yeah, I think I can see where this is going. Anyway, there's a famine in the land of Canaan. Famines were pretty popular in those days. So they all decide to go to Egypt. But there's a problem. They're just about to enter Egypt when Abram gets a really bad feeling about things. He tells Sarai that, she's not bad looking. And thus, when the Egyptians, who obviously must be a pretty lascivious lot, see her, they will want her, in the biblical sense. And they will kill him because she's his wife. But if she pretends to be his sister, now, that's a whole different kettle of fish. All will be well. No harm will come to him, and he will live happily ever after. Okay. That is the most stupid bit of logic I think I've ever heard. Men who are prepared to kill to get a woman they fancy will murder a husband in order to get his wife, but they wouldn't dream of killing a brother to get his sister. Oh, no. What difference does it make? He's a man with a woman they want. They'll kill him either way. But Abram and Sarai stick to their brother-sister story. The Egyptians saw that she was a bit of all right, and they told Pharaoh. And Sarai ends up in Pharaoh's household and on the way to Pharaoh's bed. He making a pretty good offer to Abram for her. Now, this bit of immorality could be quite profitable for Abram, as indeed it is. But God isn't having any of it. Oh, no, he's not going to allow this deceit to continue. This is highly immoral, and God sends punishment for the transgressions against morality that is taking place. He smites Abram for the falsehood, allowing Pharaoh to think Sarai is his sister just to save his own neck, and he smites Sarai for going along with it, willingly going to the bed of a man other than her husband, right? No, of course not. No, he doesn't do that. I mean, that would make perfect sense. Punish the guilty. That's the usual way you do it. But no, with the wonderful logic found in the Bible, God smites Pharaoh, who was, of course, totally unaware of the falsehood, acted in good faith, believing Sarai was Abram's sister and thus available, and he is the innocent party in the affair. But God sends great plagues to Pharaoh and his house, like his household had anything to do with it, while Abram and Sarai, a pair of deceitful liars, they get off scot-free. Pharaoh called Abram, and he said, "What is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why saidst thou she is my sister, so that I might have taken her to me to wife?" To say Pharaoh was annoyed would be a bit of an understatement. And who could blame him? He and his household have just been plagued for doing absolutely nothing wrong, while this pair of liars get a pat on the head from God like they're a couple of saints. Pharaoh tells them to get out of Egypt, like now. And so Abram and Sarai and Lot all depart from Egypt. Abram's a wealthy man with lots of cattle, silver and gold, unpunished in any way for his underhanded, deceitful ways. Biblical justice and fair play in action. Yeah, right. So they all go back up into the land of Canaan. And Lot has been doing pretty well for himself, having tents and flocks and herds. So things are looking good, at least to begin with. But the land wasn't really able to sustain so many people. It's a bit arid, and the livestock and that they have with them. And there were problems between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. So eventually they decide to separate, with Lot choosing the fertile plains of the Jordan, pitching his tent towards the city of Sodom, while Abram stayed in Canaan. But, oh no, things are about to get a great deal worse. And in part 3, we shall have some really spectacular genocide. People dying in all directions, death and destruction, dare I say it, on a truly biblical scale. And as so often in the Old Testament, slaughtering the innocent along with the evil ones. A sort of, when in doubt, just kill them all. That was the policy, which of course does work. I mean, it guarantees you get the ones you wanted. Though unfortunately you get everybody else as well, but that's okay because God did it. Or rather, somebody who knew nothing about pretty much everything said he did it by writing it in a book, which of course makes perfect sense. So, tune in again for the next exciting adventure of this rather unbelievable tale.